How's everyone doing? Have you enjoyed the day? Good. Well, I'm excited to be here. I came from Utah. Anybody been to Utah here? We invite you all out to take you skiing or mountain biking anytime. My name's Dave Blake. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called ClientSuccess. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what we call the customer success maturity model. Just a little bit about my background. I was with a company early on called Omniture, which was a leading web analytics company. I built the strategic accounts team there globally. And then we went hypergrowth, IPO, and were acquired by Adobe. And I ran the global enterprise customer success team for Adobe. And I after a decade of building and scaling customer success teams, I was tired of cobbling together solutions. And so I founded ClientSuccess to bring a solution to market that is very tailored for customer success teams that I wish I would have had. And so a lot of the experience that I've had in those companies, I'll share with you today about scaling customer success teams. At ClientSuccess, we have a saying that success is the new sales. And the reason why we say that is because in a SaaS environment, as you know, we've heard a lot about that today. Those who take care of their existing customer base scale their companies much faster. They grow much faster. Their valuations are much higher. And we also see an interesting trend where vice presidents or VPs of customer success actually have higher quotas than their sales counterparts lately when you think about renewals and expansion. And so today we're going to talk about how you can drive success, how you build and scale a team to really build and drive revenue over time. This is pretty intuitive here. Customer success is the other side of the funnel. Really, your goal of customer success is to understand your customers' business objectives and to drive value with your customers so that you can have increased sales and referrals in the form of renewals, cross-sales, expansion, whatever you want to call it. But that's a key area. And as you know, we talked a lot about today, a small difference in renewal rate or reducing churn can have a huge impact over time within your business. As you can see here, it's exponential if you can just focus on customer success. How many here have a customer success team today? Okay, so we have some with good experience and others maybe be building over time. When we built out this model, we looked at it on a scale of 7 vectors, if you will. Along the top, we have people, culture, process, journey, metrics, technology, and segmentation. And then down on the rows, we have startup, emerging, scaling, and enterprise. If you think about startup, we would say maybe seed stage, maybe Series A, emerging, Series A, B, scaling, Series C, D, and then typically enterprise is a public company. So in the audience today, I'm just curious, how many would consider yourself a startup in that range? Okay, emerging, and then scaling, and enterprise. Okay, we got a good mix here. So what we'll talk about, I want to show you kind of how we've seen companies evolve down that path from startup to enterprise. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a company that was startup and went through enterprise, and then now going through that same process again as we built ClientSuccess. And so we'll talk a little bit about the attributes that you see and how companies typically go down that path in each of these vectors up at the top. So we'll first start with the most important building block, and that's people. If you look at people and what does your customer success team look like over that time period, it really starts as a startup where you've got a founder and a core founding team and maybe some support reps, and it really is what I would call scrappy customer success. You're just doing everything you can to take care of your customers. And then you eventually, merging companies, they hire CSM leader, maybe some CSMs. And then as they scale, they'll go to a VP of customer success and a larger team to eventually enterprise companies have a chief customer officer and also operational teams fully dedicated to supporting the customer success team. Now, some companies may go along these spectrums that I talk about much faster. So some may hire a VP of customer success much earlier, and that's great. But that's typically the progression that you have when you build out your customer success team. When you look at that, one of the common questions we have is, how do we scale? How do we know when to hire new CSMs? And we look at it on, there's a couple of rules of thumb. One is that typically you would look at a $2 million book of business per CSM in general. The lower your price point, obviously you can't support that. If you're selling a product that's an average price point of $5,000, a CSM couldn't support that $2 million. But if you're in more of a mid-market, small business and enterprise, a typical rule of thumb is about $2 million in ARR that they could manage, or 50 accounts. Once a CSM gets to about 50 accounts, they just can't effectively manage 50 relationships. And so at that point, you need technology or automation. The other factors that you look at are contract value. The higher the contract value, obviously the lower the number of customers that each CSM is managing, and the lower the contract value, the higher number they can manage. And then the last consideration is product complexity. If your product is much more complex, then you'll want to lower the ratio with your CSMs. So just a simple guideline on how do I know. The best companies, they establish this, a rule or a trigger model with their CFO so that they know that for every X number of customers or X dollars of revenue, I should be able to hire a CSM to get in front of that revenue. The next common question is, how do I compensate CSMs? And I commonly see three models. One is a base, and I've gone through each of these, and there's certainly pros and cons, but one is base, the second is base plus bonus, and the third is base plus variable. And I really advocate now, after going through all those, to try to add some kind of variable component to your CSM's compensation plan to reward them for all the work that they do. And focus highly on, when you look at the variable, we have this model where we say CSM's on your right and sales on your left. A CSM model that we typically like to see is a 75% base to 25% variable. And then within that variable component, to consider 75% of that variable based on retention, the other based on growth, and then maybe even switching that for sales, the sales counterpart, so that you have this collaboration and this alignment across comp plans, but clear roles and responsibilities on how what their roles and responsibilities are, by showing retention is primarily for the CSMs and growth for the sales reps. Okay, those are some considerations around people. The next one is culture. And this is important as well. And typically what you see from a culture is that initially the team is really focused on product market fit and customer acquisition. And then you start to form that seedling of a customer success team and early discussions and focus on customer success. It usually is instigated by pain in that area. You've been acquiring customers, and all of a sudden you start to lose customers, and your retention is hit. It's a painful thing, and you start saying, hey, we need to start focusing on customers and build this culture. And then eventually, the best companies really infuse this customer first mentality and this collaboration around the customer across the organization. And then finally, a progression where the entire company is united around customer success metrics and the overall customer experience. We love to say that customer success is not a department, it is a culture. And so if you can break down the silos in your organization and have everybody understand the customers, interact with customers, and focus on their success, you'll have a more successful company as well. A typical progression in here, if you start on the left at product market fit, we talked a little bit about that. That's typically what the focus of companies are early on. Customer acquisition. You start to introduce basic customer success metrics. You eventually hire a VP of customer success on your executive team that represents your customers. The board is really start to be focused on customers. And then you start looking at cross-functional initiatives around the customer experience as a whole, until where the company and the individuals from the front line to the top are empowered to take care of the customers, meaning they understand what they can do to take care of a customer in situations that they don't have to ask permission. And most customers, the companies that have adopted this customer success as a culture have driven that empowerment and enabled that empowerment within your company. So think about your company and your team and ask yourself, are they empowered to make decisions that will benefit the customer, or do they have to go through you or other members of the team to take care of the customer? So customer success as a culture. The next one is process. And process is important because this is where you start to be able to really scale your organization. You've got the right people in place. You've started to drive the right type of culture. And the next one is, how do we then take process and implement process that will take care of the customer and scale over time? At first, there is no process. It's just ad hoc. You're just taking care of customers the best you can. It's very reactive, and in an early environment where there's not much process, you have a lot of what we call heroism, or a lot of heroes on the front line that are doing extraordinary things to just take care of customers the best they can. As you continue to grow, you start to formalize process in the form of basic onboarding, implementation, and support type metrics. How many support tickets? How many customers do we have? Some of those things. And then as you continue to scale, it's really important to focus on repeatable methodology. And we're big believers that at the end of the day, the fundamentals will drive success in your business. If you can find the fundamentals within your customer success team, how often should we talk to customers? How do we engage through the onboarding process? If you start to just focus on the fundamentals, you don't have to be advanced. Focus on the fundamentals, and you'll have a great success within your team. And then over time, you start to have specialized teams and specialized process that help. A lot of enterprise teams have specialized onboarding teams. They may have specialized implementation teams, consultants, even renewal specialists that are very focused on a part of the customer journey that they want to build effective processes around. The process evolution is, it goes in this matter. First of all, you're just reactive. There is no process. You eventually work and you build out the proactive plans. How are we going to engage with customers in a proactive way to drive high retention and growth? Then you're looking at repetitive. How can I repeat that? How can I make it consistent from one CSM to the other, that they do the same types of processes across the team? And then eventually it's collaborative. You start breaking down the barriers. You're starting to look at how you collaborate around. You might have account planning. You might engage with different teams, and to where you start to have predictability. When you get to predictability, you start to see that we know that if we do X, that the outcome is Y, and then finally it's transformative. Your organization is in a much different level. I saw this at Adobe when we implemented a customer success or a customer experience initiative called the Customer Immersion Program, where we had all the VPs go through a process of really stepping in customers' shoes and understanding that we were really hard to do business with at the time. And once the executives understood that, they started driving and infusing this customer-first mentality through the organization, and it transformed our entire organization. We started breaking down barriers, and we started simplifying across the organization. And every discussion that we had as a company in our company meetings was really focused much more on the customer rather than our internal success and our internal evolution. A lot of the discussion that you typically have around process could be focused on what people call customer journey mapping. And that's how it's mapping out what your journey, what the touch points of your customers interactions with your company and how you're going to engage with your customers over time. If you look at the progression of customer journey mapping, initially very limited. You're really just focused on getting customers on board and up and running on your product, and so it becomes a fragmented experience sometimes. Even customers may feel that. They may feel that you have a good onboarding, but after that, what's next? And so as you think about your customer journey, think about how, look broader than just the typical touch points, and how can you deliver an amazing customer experience from the first interaction. So you typically focus next on onboarding and implementation and renewals, and then start looking at proactively engaging across that journey and delivering great touch points across what we call the customer lifecycle, and then focus on how you do that comprehensively across the team, and even measuring the outcomes and across that journey. Typically for customer journey maps, this is a very high-level version of one. But as you look at building out your customer journey maps, it's not something you could typically do in an afternoon. Typically, customers who build out their customer journey map, it's a journey itself. A lot of them spend several days. They get a cross-functional group in a room and talk about the customer journey from the first time they have any kind of interaction with your brand all the way through the entire life cycle of the company. I've seen some companies who have dedicated an entire room to the customer. They call it the customer journey room. I've had another one called the customer listening post, where they have this customer journey built with Post-it notes or other things on the board, and they're always kind of refining that over time. I've seen some that have built a room with just completely whiteboard walls, painted whiteboard walls that they go in there. They monitors that help understand the customer experience, have all their metrics around the customer, and so it's this room where you can kind of go in and be immersed in your customer. The one thing that we typically see that's a challenge with the customer journey map that a lot of companies, the mistake they typically make is they go and they spend a week building out the customer journey, and they get it done, but they've never even asked the customer their perspective on the journey. They've never really taken an outside-in view. They're always taking an inside-out view. And so it doesn't matter how well you design your customer journey. If you're not getting input from the customer, you may be completely missed. I remember an experience we had, again, at Adobe, where we had a particular pain point where we thought our customers were really frustrated with the time to resolution with bugs. We had a very high time to resolution. So our engineering team and our customer success and support teams did a ton of effort over several months to reduce the time of closure of bugs. And one time we went up to one of our strategic accounts. It was actually an Intel, and we went and we sat down with them and we talked about this. We said, hey, we know that you're concerned about the time to resolution. We're doing this. We mapped out all these internal programs that we were working on to reduce the time to resolution with bugs. And Intel actually took a step back and they said, actually, we don't care about the resolution as much. We understand these things take time. We have bugs ourselves. We understand it. What you're missing is that all we need is more transparency, because we're representing our stakeholders for you, and they're asking for what's the status. And so that was a great example to me to say we were focusing on the wrong things. And when you go and you ask the customer what their expectations are, it may completely redesign and redefine your customer journey map. So make sure you engage your customers in this process in some way, or a representation of customers as you build out your own customer journey map. And then make sure that you look at every touch point and ask yourself, how can I deliver an amazing experience across the team in a collaborative way during all these touch points? And then the last thing is just to remember that these customer journey maps, they're an evolving, living, breathing exercise. You're not going to do it once and be done. You want to do it over and over again to refine and update it over time as a team. I love this saying by Disney. They say, and those who have experienced the Disney experience, you understand this. And the concept is who owns the customer at what time. Disney just basically says somebody always owns the moment. And so in your company, who owns the moment for your customer across that customer journey? And how are you delivering an amazing experience through each of those moments? Okay, the next question is metrics. I know Helen and team talked a lot about metrics earlier today. There's a ton of customer success metrics. It's a big topic right now. There's a lot of solutions out there that measure this. The typical progression on metrics is that initially you're focused on basic metrics, number of customers, basic MRR numbers, customer counts, and support metrics or basic health metrics, just which ones are happy and which ones are angry, typically. The next progression is you start to formalize your SaaS metrics. You start to understand usage a little bit more and focusing on that. You're looking at your retention numbers. Your board's looking at those numbers, and so you're starting to pull those together. And then you start to have more complex. You might start doing predictive modeling or forecasting around numbers to where some enterprise companies have built entire teams focused on customer analytics and building custom dashboards and fancy algorithms and advanced insights. So there's different stages. My suggestion is, as you look at different metrics, and this is a very small sample, is one, to understand there's different types of metrics, and then two, keep it basic at first. Focus your team on the essence of what is important to you as a company. Obviously, there's core success metrics. You want to look at MRR growth. You want to look at churn. You want to look at logo retention as well as revenue retention. And net negative churn is what everybody, or negative churn, is what everybody's looking for. But there's also a lot of deep dive analyses that you should do as well around cohort analysis, churn analysis. There's different things that will be a little bit deeper. Engagement metrics. At the end of the day, I believe a lot of customer success really comes down to engagement. One is your customer's engagement with your product and their engagement and your engagement with them. But also, how is your team engaging with your customers? How are they performing? So those are some metrics. And then one that sometimes people discount is subjective metrics. This is just getting feedback from the team, those who are interacting with your customers the most, giving them the opportunity to provide insights into the health. We're big believers in combining objective and subjective metrics, because if you look at just the objective metrics, just the data-driven insights, it could be a false positive. I know of an experience where somebody was using a marketing automation solution, and for that company and for that marketing team, even though they were unhappy with the solution, they weren't letting their usage drop off at all because it was part of their daily, the plumbing of the operation. And this marketing automation team didn't know they were going to churn until the day they turned off their solution and switched over to HubSpot. And that's because and it caught them by surprise, because they were relying on usage metrics alone to understand the health. Now, if that company had called and had engaged with this client and really understood the challenges, they may have raised a red flag by simply notifying, changing the color to red, and giving insights about the health that could have saved that account. So you want to keep it simple, build slowly, but don't forget both subjective insights as well as objective data-driven insights as well. Okay, technology. From a technology standpoint, you might relate to this. A lot of people at the beginning, their technology is email, calendar, and spreadsheets. I know that for many years, even at an enterprise company, I had a team of 120 worldwide and a $400 million book of business we were trying to retain, and we used email, calendar, and spreadsheets mostly, and a few fields on Salesforce, and kind of cobbled that together. Eventually, you add certain systems, but they're disparate and fragmented, and cobbled together with manual insights. We've heard a lot of customer success leaders who spend hours a week pulling data, crunching data to understand health and the performance. Lately, over the last several years, there's been customer success solutions that have come out that are very tailored for customer success, very focused on the workflows and applications and metrics that a customer success team would use, and we're one of those. And then eventually they can combine all this into more advanced automation, integration, and workflows. So if you look at the typical team, and you might all relate to this, you might be cobbling together a lot of systems, whether it be your survey, spreadsheets, your CRM data, manual data. But as you progress, you'll want to look at having a customer success solution and how that fits into your entire ecosystem. The ecosystem of your sales team, your billing team, your marketing automation, and how does that impact your team and really drive success and efficiency across your team to deliver the metrics that you need and the insights that you need across the team. And then finally, the last group is segmentation. And from a segmentation standpoint, this is how you segment your customers and how you strategize. As much as you want to treat every customer the same, and that's kind of an ideal, you can't as you scale. And so as you evolve your segmentation model, the key thing is to understand your different customer segments and then build specific strategies and maybe hire specific skill sets to accomplish the goals of each segment. So typically you see no segmentation. It's big in small customers. It's whoever's unhappy and happy. Eventually, you start segmenting by size of customer account or deal size, and maybe location. But maybe you align with your sales territory. And then eventually, you start having this global segmentation where you're looking at team size, geography, and you have very specialized teams by segment, perhaps. A typical kind of evolution follows this. Again, big, small, maybe very simple like that. Then you go to SMB, mid-market, enterprise, and strategic. You may start to go geography in different locations, global geography, and then into a vertical segmentation where you have very specialized expertise in media or entertainment. I would suggest segmenting your customers fairly early. Once you get about 200 customers, then I would suggest segmenting. Again, you may have hired differently, and you may have different resources. For a strategic account team, it's a different profile that you're hiring for, and there's maybe different metrics and different objectives versus your mid-market team, where you hire a different personality who's much more tactical, likes to solve problems, versus a high-level relationship. So find your ways to segment your data, segment your team, and segment your strategy for those customers. Now, I know we talked a lot about that, but hopefully we've given you some insights today of how you might think about building and scaling your customer success team. So that ultimately that your company will confidently be able to say that our success team really is the new sales. It really is not only retaining our customers, but driving new revenue from happy customers, new referrals across your target prospects, and ultimately great success for your company. Now, all of this stuff, I will happy if you want to send me an email, dave@clientsuccess.com. I'm happy to share. We went through it very quickly, but happy to share the slides and also happy to talk about any of these with you individually. But thank you for having me today, and have a great evening.